So I want to first say, oh,
that's great.
Okay. I want to first say that it's been actually years, probably a good 3 to 5 years since I've done any of the research in the nail salon. So I probably do not have that much to offer when it comes to the current research and acknowledging that. So today, if you will be patient with me, I actually want to share my personal journey and how it led me to the work in doing this research. As you see here, the photo here is one of my mom and myself early on. And it's really to talk about the lives behind this labor of love that we have and really the lives behind the workforce members. I consider myself a Vietnamese refugee, a daughter, a researcher, and an advocate at heart. And all of these different identities make me who I am for the past so many years. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And Lisa's right.
Hey, too. Yeah, I'm sorry. We just have to do some check-in about the interpretation. We're having some sound issues right now. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Hey, Antu and Jan, can you, I think what we're hearing is that there's a lot of echo and it's breaking in and out on your side. If you want to test it out a little bit. And maybe some of our folks, if anyone on our team could just message in the chat if you can hear the interpreters clearly. I'll just talk. Hello, we are getting ready.
Có thể là bây giờ anh hay chị cô có thể để gần cách nào gần được không? Tại vì cái tiếng echo đằng sau nó nhiều quá nhé. Echo và anh chị có thể nói chậm từng chữ một thì nó dễ hiểu hơn, tại vì đôi khi nó hơi ồn ào đó, cho nên echo hơi nhiều đó nhé. Okay.
Yeah, I think you just need to make sure that you're pushing out on the correct channels.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Okay.
Are we okay to move forward?
I think
yes.
I think we're waiting for a minute. Okay. Sure.
Okay. Also, just be mindful of like your channels. Okay. Let's go ahead and continue.
Okay, I'll continue. And I noticed that Tony's on and he just did our general meeting. So hi, Tony.
Có rõ hơn chưa ạ?
Nghe được không anh Tony?
Dạ, mọi người nghe có rõ hơn không ạ?
Yeah, we can hear it very clear.
Có rõ không ạ? Có phải không?
Nghe rõ.
Hy vọng không có ồn phải không? Dạ rồi. Chị Thư bắt tiếp tục kìa.
Do I need to make an interpreter now?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, cảm ơn. So I wanted to share a little bit about my beginning.
Tôi muốn chia sẻ một chút xíu về cuộc đời của tôi.
So I actually can hear the interpreter right now. Is that?
Yeah, it should be fixed now.
Okay, great. So I wanted to share a little bit about my beginning. I was born in Vietnam, right at the very end of the Vietnam War. So right around 1975. These are photos actually of my mom and my siblings, and I was the little baby that she's holding there. So right at the end of the war, as we all know, April 30th was the fall of Saigon. These aren't my photos. They are photos from others that I've listed the source. But this is what it looked like. And I think many of the salon workers and owners know that history of what the traumatic event of the fall of Saigon and what it meant to escape your own country. For us, my dad was actually supposed to get onto that helicopter because he actually had fought in the war and was trained by the CIA. But at the very last minute, as he was in one of those lines, one of his friends turned to him and said, if you leave now, you will never see your family. And so he turned around and walked through all the crowds and came back and stayed with us. And so we actually didn't leave in 1975. We waited years later and actually took our chances escaping in the middle of the night on a boat, a fishing boat, hundreds of us crowded together. And we sailed 4 days at sea, taking our chances. And so you have to really think about what it is that makes a family decide that they will take their chances at survival or death at sea than to stay in a country. And this is an important history for many of our people that, we can't really ignore about, the trauma, the refugee experience. We ended up being pulled into Indonesia and set up camp there. And, all throughout we were moved to different camps. We stayed for about a year in the refugee camps, and it was not easy. We didn't know if we were actually going to be sponsored and brought over, but we finally made it to the US. We resettled in San Jose. At the very end, we landed on December 28th of 1979 at San Francisco Airport. My dad's superior was one of the sponsors for us, so we were able to stay in California. And the resettlement years were definitely very hard. We relied on public assistance, on Medi-Cal, on food assistance, on housing assistance, all of that. And I went to public school with my siblings. All of this, I think, really affected how I view the world and view what it was like to work for vulnerable populations. My mom actually was working in a hair and nail salon. She actually, after years of settling here and taking care of us, decided to go back to work. She had previously worked in the hair and nail salons in Vietnam, and then decided to get her license as a cosmetologist. Once she got her license, and I remember working with her to practice her English, to really go through all the practices. And for those in the salon business, they know what it's like, that exam, it's not easy to go through all the process, to take the exam. And then she worked for a number of years. And in 2004, after a couple of incidents, we found out that she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And it was actually really one of those traumatic experiences for us, because she actually, went through cancer treatment because it was stage 4. But it was during those moments when I actually moved home to live with her and take care of her. So both my sister and I, can take her to cancer treatments. That during one of those moments, during one of her injections, she said, I don't understand why someone like me will develop cancer. And she, I should share, actually had no more than a grade school education because she grew up very poor in Vietnam. But I couldn't understand where she was going. So I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, actually, there's no family history of cancer in my family. And I know either cancer is caused by genetics, or it is caused by something else in which you are around in the environment. And she said, the only thing I can think of is that I work in a salon where I'm around so many chemicals. And I remember this was really a hard time for me. I had gotten my master's in public health, and I was actually working at the state health department with the cancer registry. But at that moment, I didn't really want to talk about it. I really wanted to focus on her treatment. And she had said, if I got this, and I actually know that so many other women work in the salons, it's an important area for you to do this research. She wanted to know a little bit more. And I remember telling her, like, I don't really know what to do at this point, and it was actually in my mom's moment when she said, well, I remember when I got licensed, they took my social security number. And you have to know that for many of us immigrants and refugees, we remember when we have to give over a social security number. And she said, every 2 years, they asked me to renew my license. And so she said, there must be a file somewhere. So there it was that my mom actually came up with the idea for my PhD dissertation, which I went on to get. 13 months after she was diagnosed, she had passed away from cancer. I started my PhD then, and it was really to really understand the cancer rates among workers compared to those in the general population. Because in my mom's mind, she wanted to know if this was a risk for other workers like herself. So I always say my mom had quite the measurable impact on research for me. Not only was she an inspiration, but she actually was the brains behind that research. I went on to UC Berkeley and got my PhD. I actually went to the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology, and for almost 2 years made the case that they should hand over the licensee file to me, which they eventually did. And because I did research with the State Department, in the State Health Department, I was able to link it up to the California Cancer Registry and look at the cancer rates among those in this workforce compared to the general population. Interesting enough, we didn't find the higher rates of cancer, in part because I think that there was still a lot of time since those who enter into this workforce and being exposed was actually quite limited. And cancer, as we know, takes a while. But I went on with the same idea and actually linked it to the the birth registry. So anytime a woman gave birth, we have their files. And I did find a link between women who worked in the cosmetology and manicurists, who worked as manicurists, especially those who were Vietnamese, compared to the general population, actually had birth outcomes that were small for gestational age. And so a lot of that really indicated some hormonal impacts potentially. But I went on to do research, and I actually felt like the people that I learned the most from were the salon workers themselves. Going into the salons, I actually did a lot of exposure assessment, measuring the chemicals that are around them as they're working. So in this photo, you see one worker wearing a small air monitoring device. We were among the first on there. I see Min Thu Lei is on this, and I know she worked very hard with me, as well as many others, to actually convince the workers to allow us into the salons, to wear these air monitors, to send them to the lab to test for things like toluene and other chemicals that they may be exposed to as they're working with the products. But in talking to salon workers and owners, we really understood what were the barriers, what really made them and inspired them to want to make changes. And that was very not only rewarding for me, but healing for me in my own research, knowing that those who were closest to the problem actually held the answers, similar to my mom. So I think as we look at, as we have the second research convening, is to really honor the knowledge and the wisdom of the salon workers themselves and how they hold so much of the answers. I hear that you're going to be watching this soon. It was a documentary that I think a number of us are in, Lisa, as well as myself, Julia, the co-founder, and really at the helm of the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative, and many others. I see Layden and Lupita on here as well. I actually didn't want to get interviewed. It was always hard to share my story about my mom. It was actually a very emotional story, but I was happy with how they did it. And I look forward to hearing from some of you and what you thought about the series itself, and especially the episode on nails. I wanted to just, again, emphasize how the workers themselves, those who've lived the experiences, actually hold so much of the knowledge when we think about research. And it's actually not just because we're trying to be, honorable, but it really is about understanding so much in those who are in the salons. When I did the exposure assessment, they were able to explain to me when they're close to certain chemicals, when they're eating. I mean, all of those came from them opening up to us and understanding the exposure. even my mom and explaining about the cancer, the licensee file, and that they were tracking those who were actually licensed was a huge deal. And as we continue the research, I hope that we will continue to look upon these experts in finding the answers around both the impacts on their health, as well as what we can do to have a safer place for them to work. And I wanted to share a quick story that during those years, I remember Lisa was with me when we flew to DC to actually speak in front of congressional staff. I remember Jamie was there, Julia, and there was an elderly man who somehow found my phone number. I was traveling with my 6-month-old at that time, and he called me out of the blue, and he actually said that his wife, who worked as a manicurist for many years, had just died from cancer. And he said, I really believe that this research is really important. And it was that moment when you really felt like, this is not just about science. This is not just about, how do we, get the answers. It's about people's lives. And I remember thinking about how I've never met this man, and we shared so much in common, and just really being encouraged by those who are impacted by this. And I share that story because it stayed with me in so many ways. And lastly, I want to appreciate all of the salon workers and owners who've opened up to us during this period. On the left-hand side, you see a picture of my mom and dad. When we first came here, I think they were in maybe the late 20s, early 30s, possibly. And they have been a constant inspiration for me. And on the right-hand side, I wanted to share about Dr. Julia Quint, who has since passed away. She was a biochemist who, worked on labor rights, and she had heard about what was happening in the nail salons, and actually continue on to not just advise us on the research. She was on our research advisory committee, and she would review a lot of the chemicals that are in the products and really be able to guide me when I was doing my research. But even at the very end, when she was very ill, she would fly to DC to actually testify so that we weren't pushing on the wrong types of interventions that would put the onus on workers, but really making policy changes that get at manufacturers and what they put in here. And I wanted to call her out because in this work, it's not just about our community, not just about scientists, it is about all the allies who have supported us in this. And so as you move forward, thank you so much for having me share my story. And I hope that we are always reminded of how we stand on the shoulders of giants. Thank you.